So what we are going to be talking about is technology, how you define what technology is, how technology relates to how we come to know and interact with the world, where technology comes from, is it good or bad? And then ultimately, somewhere down the line, we're going to get practical about it. In the episode we did way back about the news and about the different ways of knowing, we talked about technē as one of the ways of knowing. Technē being the Greek word from which technology, for example, and technical are derived. So technē is one way of knowing amongst others that we talked about in that episode. The other ones, for the record, were the nous that we talked about as being a sort of spiritual sense and using the term sense in a very literal way.
Yeah.
That it functions sort of like an eye, an ear,
Right.
a nose, if you will. Right. That the nous receives primarily thoughts, but also potentially images, visions, right, what have you, from spiritual reality. And we talked about episteme in that episode, which often gets translated as science in English, which is a type of knowledge. There's dealing with things that could be demonstrated, as in like mathematically demonstrated.
Yeah.
This is the type of scientific knowledge that scientific materialists say is the only type of knowledge.
Yes. The to me kind of knowledge.
Right. Yeah. You have evidence, prove it to me, make a mathematical proof, show me a repeated experiment, right, etc. And then the other two are kind of related. Prudence, which is phronesis in Greek, is usually translated in English as prudence, is sort of moral reasoning, knowing what to do in a given situation.
Yeah.
And then wisdom, Sophia, right? And wisdom is the ability to recognize patterns and relationships within creation. So not patterns in the sense of that we talk about like scientific laws or something, but just in the way that things work, being able to see those patterns and then apply them, right, to day-to-day life. And it's possible for someone to be very advanced in any one of those ways of knowing and not be very advanced in the others.
Sure.
Right. So, with the nous, right, you have the monastic who has, received the vision of Christ in his uncreated glory, but couldn't do a calculus problem to save his life, right? Can't quote Shakespeare, right? Isn't educated in that sense, right?
No.
Or you have people who have advanced scientific and mathematical knowledge, but no spiritual sense whatsoever, right? And you have people who are very wise, but do not necessarily have a lot of book learning. You have people who live very morally good lives in the world, but don't necessarily have a lot of book learning. You have people with a lot of book learning who are rather foolish in their personal lives and decision making, etc. Right? And so the fifth one of these was technē, right? Which at the time we defined as sort of literally know-how.
Yeah, know-how. Yeah.
Right. Knowing how to do things, right? Knowing how to manipulate things in the world, right? And to bring about certain results, right? So, and again, someone can be very advanced in this, in a particular area of this or in general, right? There are plenty of handymen out there, probably handy women also, right? You can think of an auto mechanic, right? They may not have a lot of book learning, but they know how to work with machines, right? How to make them go. Think of a pack lead.
Things to make us go.
Yeah. um, so, yeah. And so one of the things that distinguishes technē from these other ways of knowing is that technē is not knowledge of a thing or of the relationships between things per se.
Yeah, which is kind of questions of how things are.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't have technē with regard to like an object.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have technē with regard to a chair.
Yeah. The question with technē is not what is it?
Right.
That's not the question.
Now, technē would be knowing how to make a chair.
Right.
Right. But knowing how to make a chair or how to fix a chair is not the same thing as knowledge of the chair itself.
Or knowing how to use a chair in a wrestling move, which I've seen.
Right. Which is a separate set of technē.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Although almost everybody has banned unprotected chair shots. You got to take shots to the back, not the head.
I mean, you would
concussion protocols. Yeah. So, yeah, and it's not necessarily the knowledge of relationships between things. Like when we're talking about wisdom or prudence being, relations between people in terms of morality and ethics. Right. Technē is not necessarily knowledge of existing relationships between things, but it is a knowledge of the potential relationships between things. Right. So
very philosophical.
Right.
Don't worry, people. We'll reify this a little bit. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get there. Yeah. We'll come back down to earth. But so if you think about, right, there's a rock on the ground, right? And so you have a person who is very advanced in technē. So this is a very skilled person. This is a skilled worker, advanced in knowing how to do things, right? So he may not be able to tell you exactly what type of rock it is or the mineral base or what elements compose the rock, right? The way the geologist does, right? And he may not be able to tell you how that rock got there, right? Whether it's from erosion of the surrounding area, et cetera, et cetera. But he can look at that rock and come up with uses for that rock. He can look at that rock and say, well, I could fit this rock in with these other rocks to make a wall, right? Or this is a rock of the right size and shape and smoothness. I could use this to make, right, a grinder to grind grain, right? So that's technē. How could I use this object that I find? What relationships could I put this rock into with other things, right, in order to produce some result?
Yeah, it's about accomplishing purposes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so ultimately this is knowledge of how something can be used, how it can be manipulated, how it can be put to work. Right. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about technē. It's an instrumental kind of knowledge, meaning I know how I can use this thing as an instrument to accomplish something else. Right. I know how I can use this thing. And this is true also in the sense of, so one of the elements, of course, when we think about this kind of knowledge is, well, part of being able to take things that exist and put them into new relationships and do things with them is inventing things.
Right. I mean, and we tend to think of, like when we use the word invention or inventing, I mean, most of us think now about, some guy with spectacles sitting up in his attic, creating some new machine or whatever.
And then Thomas Edison comes and steals the patent.
Yeah, exactly. An inventor, but invention, at least in English, has had a longer and broader history than that. It's often been used in literary contexts. So like an author engages in invention, like he's not making some kind of device or machine, but he's making characters, he's making situations, he's making plots, right? But also, I mean, it applies to like art as well and to philosophy, because all of this is the way that you use, whether it's language or pigment or whatever, for this purpose. So it's not just about making a thing. It can also be about making concepts, or ideas or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking existing ideas or words or whatever that already exist and arranging them and relating them to each other in a new way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's worth noting, because we've talked about how ideas come from outside of our heads, right? In that episode on the news, we talked about how thoughts come into our heads. Thoughts are like sights or sounds, right? Sights and sounds aren't generated within our brain, hopefully, right? Barring mental illness. But
Or substances.
they are received, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In the same way, thoughts are received, right? And ideas are received. And so this is actually included in the word invent.
Right. And I don't even have the jingle ready, but etymologically, and the thing is, this is one that I did not look up. It's one that you informed me of, but I'm always happy to receive new etymologies. Invent. So that vent is from, I think it's from Latin via French, probably looking at it. But it means, to come, or to, and then invent is to come in. So the idea is that it's something that comes in. Like that's what literally invent means, is it comes in.
Right. And so
it just came to me.
Yeah, but it's not created ex nihilo.
Right. Comes from somewhere else.
In a sense, it already exists, but but it is brought into existence, right? Which is not exactly the same thing. As we've talked about before when we talk about different aspects of creation. But so why are we going through all this? Ultimately, we're going through this because we want to talk about technology, and so talking about technē is to try and get us to a definition of technology, right? And ultimately, every product of technē, right? Every product of that way of knowing, of that mode of reasoning, can be rightly called technology. So we tend to have a lot of arbitrary lines in our head, right? In terms of what's technology and what isn't. Right. So we tend not to think of primitive things as technology, like the wheel.
Right.
Right. Or a saddle. Right. Or a cart. Right. But these are things that were technological innovations at one point. Right. At some point in the past, this was a thing that humanity did not have, and then it had them, and then it spread. Right. So, and to me, and I know I'm not going to offend anybody with this, because I know we don't have any Amish listeners, because this is internet radio. But to me, one of the basic problems with not like Mennonites, etc., not all the Anabaptists, but with the Amish per se, is the line they draw on technology seems to me rather arbitrary.
Yeah. I mean, they're using, horse-drawn wagons. That's technology.
That was technology at a certain point.
They're using hats. That's technology. They're clearly using razors to get rid of the mustache.
You go to the barn raising, right? That's technological, right? They did not have barns constructed in that way for most of human history, right? And so it's just a certain point is chosen, and this far, no farther, right? And we won't go past that. But the reality is, as soon as someone looks at a rock, our technē example, right? As soon as someone looks at a rock and decides to use that rock for something, we've entered into the realm of technology.
Yeah.
They use it to build a wall. They use it to throw at someone or hit someone with. They use it to grind grain, right? Whatever they use it for, it's now technology, right? By the fact that they've taken it and put it to use. So bad news to all the anarcho-primitivists out there. You can't even use rock and be consistent with your philosophy.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way to not do technology as a human. You're using stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you could just walk the earth naked and eat berries you pick directly from a plant with your bare hand.
I guess. Please don't do that, though, people.
I don't know how long your life would last, but that's
Yeah.
You couldn't come into cities because you'd be using the road or the sidewalks. You'd have to stay out in the wilderness, right? Doing this at all times.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is an important distinction to make right at the setup, because as much as I joked at the beginning that no, technology is bad, obviously no one can say that all technology is bad, right? Because at least not and be consistent, right? We all wear clothing. When it's cold, we wear warmer clothing than when it's hot, right? Etc. Right. So, any broad generalization we make about technology, right? And so, if we decide that the cutoff for good technology is like when I was 25, right? You could do that. Right, as I'm very tempted to do, and be old man yells at clouds, right?
Yeah.
Fine, knock yourself out. But the reality is that is an arbitrary line.
Yeah, I mean, I refer to that as one's Luddite line. And you can always tell when someone has reached their Luddite line because they start referring to a piece of technology as, quote, this thing.
Yeah.
That's the point at which, like, oh, this far and no farther.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we have to acknowledge that we're being arbitrary, but people are allowed to be arbitrary if they want to, right?
Sure, of course. They're not going to stop you.
In terms of how they live their life. And so it's also important because, as Father Andrew brought up, we're not just talking about technology in terms of material physical implements. Right. Whether we mean hammers or iPhones. Right. We're also talking about ideas.
Yeah.
Right. We're also talking about concepts. We're also talking about narratives and worldviews and whatever other terminology like that. These are things that are formed. Right. They're formed out of pre-existing elements, right? But we also have to be aware, and I know I've said this on the show before, this is the infamous place where I still think I might disagree with Jonathan Pajot. And someone asked him fairly directly in a Q&A if he disagreed with me about this. And I listened carefully to Jonathan's answer twice. I'm still not totally sure if we disagree or not. So we may have to hash this out in person at Peugeot Fest or something. But so, as we said, technē, including when we're talking about ideas and concepts and worldviews and narratives and these kind of things, all of that, this is instrumental knowledge.
Yeah.
This is instrumental knowledge.
How to know how.
Yes. And so because it is instrumental, this means ideas and concepts and these things are instruments. They are not things in themselves that exist. And therefore they don't have agency. They can't do things. Right? So if we're talking about an iPhone can't do things by itself. You may have realized that yours is listening to you and giving you ad recommendations based on stuff you said around it, right? But it's still not actually the iPhone doing that. It's a piece of software installed on your phone by a human who created that piece of software, who is harvesting your data, right? The phone itself is not the agent of this, right? Any more than a hammer can drive a nail by itself. Any more than a gun can shoot someone by itself, right? So the concept of fill in the blank can't do anything by itself. And this is a sorry atheists thing, right? Because often you will hear our atheist friends say things like, religion is responsible for all the evil in the world.
Yeah.
Or religion is responsible for all the wars in history. Right? Now, aside from prima facie being kind of ridiculously broad statements, right? Religion can't do anything. Right? What the atheist is actually talking about there is not quote unquote religion. They're talking about God.
Yeah.
But since they've decided to be an atheist and don't believe in a God, they can't say God is responsible for all the wars that have ever happened. They can't say God is responsible for all the evil in the world because they don't believe in him. So they say religion.
Yeah. I mean, you could say something like, all the wars now this is not true, but you could say something like all the wars in the world include a religious element or are, motivated by religion or something like that.
Even motivated by.
Yeah, right.
Even motivated by doesn't work.
Yeah. Because
you can say in every war, people have used religion.
Right.
Instrumentally.
But religion doesn't cause things. Agents cause things.
Yeah. Right. So religion doesn't kill people. People kill people and use religion sometimes to justify it. Various religions. Right. But religion, an idea, right, can't cause anyone to do anything.
Yeah.
And this is super important to understanding history, to understanding how the world works, to helping you defeat Plato brain. Right? Plato being the idealist of all idealists. Right. And you can see this, my completely non-controversial example of the North American slave trade. Right. The North American slave trade was not caused by racism. The North American slave trade was not caused by there being verses in the New Testament that talk about slavery that don't outright condemn it. That idea is ridiculous and ahistorical. If you look at the actual history, what happened was people had a need to harvest crops like sugarcane in the New World. The average lifespan of a worker on a sugar plantation in the 18th and 19th century was 2 years.
Yeah.
That's how brutal the work was. Okay. You can't hire someone to do that.
No, they're
right.
Okay.
They needed slavery.
Yeah, they had to force people to do it.
And after the North Atlantic slave trade began, what do you see? You see in scientific circles, scientists, these are the objective ones, right? Scientists start crafting bogus race science. They start measuring skulls, right? They start doing all this nonsense, right? This bogus racial science to justify what they were already doing.
Yeah, I mean the rise of especially American phenotype racism is, crappy 19th century science.
Yes,
really.
Yes. After
and then you start getting, theology,
right?
Also trying to justify it as well,
right? Because you have Protestants in the American South participating in the slave trade. That obviously rubs pretty rough against Christianity.
Yeah.
Right? So what do they have to do?
You have to decide they're less than human.
Yeah. What do they have to do? They have to craft new ideas that will make it acceptable.
Yep.
Right. And those ideas are instruments, right, that they use to justify themselves. But those ideas are epiphenomenal. They arise after the fact. right, of what people are doing, and then those ideas get used by people to various purposes. And once those ideas are around, right, racism doesn't cause anyone to do anything. People appeal to racist ideas in order to do things.
Yeah, I mean,
in order to motivate certain people, justify behavior, divide people from each other, whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, we've said this in 100 different ways now, which is that conviction follows conditioning. You know, beliefs of whatever kind they flow out of actions, you know, and then they're used to reinforce them. There's a feedback loop for sure, but that's the way that it actually goes.
Yes. So, having beaten that possibly near dead horse enough, which is just a bizarrely cruel turn of phrase too,
isn't it?
Right, like
I don't know the origins of that one.
We can't.
Dead horse,
right?
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm gonna look that one up.
Like we can't talk about moving on from a topic without referring to beating horses to death and then continuing to beat them even after they're dead. But
apparently comes from mid-19th century, so roughly contemporaneous.
There we go. Same place where has anything good come out of the 19th century? I guess Saint Seraphim of Seraph. There, we'll answer our own question. And other saints came out of the 19th century. So, in the ancient world, right? In the ancient world, we've been talking about technē. We've been using a lot of contemporary examples, right? Or roughly contemporary identifiable examples. But in the ancient world, remember, there isn't this split between material reality and spiritual reality, right?
Yeah.
There isn't this sort of schism, right? So when we talk about technology, especially as modern people, we are very deliberately often talking about material reality and only material reality.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, a lot of the approaches to the question we're talking about tonight in general, the question of technology and the Christian faith, are approached in a way that, well, the Christian faith is one thing over here, and then technology, and it's a spiritual thing, and then there's technology, this material thing over there, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you say the word technology, people think of computers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And phones, and yeah. So, but there is not this split in the ancient world. And so technē was also something that extended into spiritual reality. There was an idea of spiritual technology, essentially, right? In the ancient world. And there have been several examples of this that we've talked about before on the show. And this is part of the questions we get about technē, right? And its relationship to some of these other things. One of them, of course, probably the most obvious, is magic, right? And in fact, the understanding of technē is part of what defines magic per se.
Yeah.
Right. Over against other elements of pagan religion.
Right.
In the ancient world. And magic is a kind of spiritual technology that brings about a result sort of in and of itself.
Yeah, it's about the recipe. Get the recipe right, and you will always get this result.
Right.
You know,
right.
that the only agent involved is basically the human, you know, and he's just manipulating stuff, basically.
Right. Right. And so just the same way that you have a recipe for baking bread, right? And if you follow it correctly, you end up with a loaf of bread, right? You have here's the love spell, here's the way to curse your enemy and give them the evil eye, right?
Yeah.
These various things. They might sometimes involve the invocation of some kind of spiritual being, but it's not the invocation of a spiritual being to enter into some kind of relationship or two-way conversation. It's doing this will compel this spiritual being to do what you want it to do.
Yes, exactly.
Right, without it having any say in the matter. Right. So then we've also talked about technē in a spiritual sense in regards to idolatry.
Yeah, which is, since this is everybody's first episode,
this is somebody's first episode.
Somebody's
okay. Everybody's first episode. We don't have 100% turnover from episode to episode, I don't think.
Although we're working on it, right? You're trying to offend as many people as possible.
I already got rid of all the Amish. And everybody who's into house music, I think, are gone already.
EDM. Yeah, I mean, so idolatry, it's the use of images in a particular way in order to trap and manipulate a god. But there is a strong sense that the god or the spirit has agency, right? So there's a kind of relationship involved there. And, it's funny, like, I've noticed that sometimes people, I think, are hesitant to think of idolatry and sacrifice to gods as being technology. And I think that's because our modern experience of quote unquote religion is that it's this special thing you do maybe one day a week, right? It's this special thing you do, right? But this was underlined for me recently because over the last week or so, I've been reading the Iliad, which in between, graphic descriptions of people's heads coming off because there's a lot of fighting in the Iliad. I mean, a lot. Like, it is very cinematic in its detail.
Yeah, I used to have a set of Homeric Greek flashcards. And by used to, I mean like nice. I mean like 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
That's when I was first learning classical Greek, and like the Homeric vocabulary cards, you learn like 13 words for spear.
Yes, exactly.
Like 12 words for shield.
Learn some exciting phrases in ancient Greek, like "I have judged you worthy of death."
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I have skewered your throat with my spear. Yeah,
right. Exactly. And so here's the thing that's interesting about reading the Iliad, which it's been a long time since I've read it, so I really recommend this to everybody, actually. And
that's bold. I'm recommending Homer. You're going out on a limb there.
Yeah, I know. The Robert Fagles translation is great. But one of the things that's interesting in this regard about that is almost any time one of the characters, one of these heroes, decides he's going to go and take on his enemies, or he sees them coming at him, or whatever it is, almost every time they will offer up a sacrifice. Like it's constant. I have lost count of how many sacrifices have been offered in the maybe 4 or 5 days that have taken place in the events that I've been reading. There's a lot of them, and some of them it's the full barbecue, right? And I mean, literally, it's talking about how juicy it is and all this kind of stuff. But in many other cases, it's they're filling up their cups with wine, but they always pour out a few drops or sometimes the whole cup to Zeus or whoever. Right. So it's not special. It's instrumental. It's like, we're about to do this thing. We need this. We want Zeus to come in. Although Zeus mostly likes to sit on his throne and laugh at everybody killing each other. We want Athena to show up. We want Poseidon. We want Ares. We want Aphrodite.
Yeah. Seems like he might be on the other side. We need to get him back on ours.
Yeah, it's super like tactical. It's very tactical and strategic, these constant offering of sacrifices. So, I mean, if you want to see this sense of instrumentality in terms of sacrifice, read the Iliad. Really. I mean, I've lost count of how many sacrifices have happened, and I'm 60% of the way through.
Yeah. Yeah. For Alexander the Great, there was no difference between, the phalanx and offering the correct sacrifices to the correct gods at the correct time.
Yeah.
In terms of how he viewed those. These are both battle tactics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. These are both, right. There's both technology in terms of strategy, right, and tactics. Yeah. And so this is an instrumental thing, right? It is very much instrumental. It is getting someone to do what you want. Right. The difference then between your sort of run-of-the-mill paganism with idolatry and sacrifice and stuff and magic is that within sacrificial ritual, there is the idea that the god can reject the sacrifice.
Right. And
the god could decide he likes the other sacrifice better. Other
Yeah,
guys
and again,
sacrifice better or what have you.
read the Iliad. It's all there. Like, this is a poem from 2,700 years ago. Like, again, we're not making this stuff up.
Yeah. Right. And so when you start using technē, some people may already be ahead of at least where we're talking here. They may be thinking, well, you can not only approach like a rock or a hammer or a piece of wood or a block of marble that you're going to sculpt or a book you're going to write or a concept you're developing. You may not only approach that in this sort of instrumental way, in this way of technē, but as we were just saying, you could kind of approach spiritual entities that way, and you could also approach people that way, right? You can approach people in the sense of, I'm going to, how can I use this person to accomplish some goal? Right. And then you can instrumentalize other things like ideas, feelings, emotions, right? You can instrumentalize those things to try to get that person to do the things you want, right? To accomplish the goal. And so when this mode of technē is applied to humans, to spiritual or divine beings, it is innately depersonalizing and dehumanizing, right? You are treating that person in the way that you would treat an object in the world, right? You are treating them as a object which you can manipulate and put into place, right? And once that begins, you've taken your first big step toward the idea of sort of a mechanistic cosmos.
Mm.
Right. And I say it's the first big step because even though they wouldn't use the word mechanistic, right? Because there were in ancient Greece some mechanical things, literally mechanical things, but
Oh, sure. They had machines.
they did not primarily think in those terms, right? So they would talk about fatalistic might be better in the classical Greek sense. But there is a sense in which everything becomes compelled and everything becomes instrumental, and therefore free will starts to depart from the picture, right? And as we move into the modern period and the spiritual realm gets sort of lopped off, either separated out so it's irrelevant to the world or denied outright later on, this becomes a kind of materialist determinism. Right? So I know we have some listeners, at least, who are at least around in contemporary philosophical circles. This is the cause du jour is, hey, can any philosopher out there come up with a way that anyone can have anything like free will?
Yeah.
Because everything has become instrumentalized. Everything has become mechanical. Everything has become clockwork.
Yeah, it's all just atoms banging against each other.
Right. Such that even my attempts to instrumentalize the people and things around me are just the effect of a cause that's causing me to do that. Right. And there's just sort of this endless chain with no original instrumentalizer now, right? Because we don't even have deists anymore. There's no original instrumentalizer whose ultimate purpose is being accomplished by this complex chain of dominoes falling. It's just dominoes all the way down, right? With no purpose, right? At least our Calvinist friends, I'll say something positive. I usually pick on them, but at least our Calvinist friends have some kind of God, right? Who kicked over the first domino and set up all the dominoes in the first place to accomplish something. Right? So there is still some sense of meaning there, even though things then are essentially mechanistic after that. right? In the modern world, our atheist friends, there's not even that,
Yeah.
right? And so you can know more for the majority opinion among philosophers. Now, I think I can safely say is that there is no free will. And therefore, right, you can no more decide what you're going to do any given day than a domino can decide which direction it's going to fall. Right. And that's it.
That's
Everything is
at all.
technē. Right? Everything is technē. So, yeah. So I didn't say this was going to be a happy episode with a feel-good ending. I never said that. Let the record show.
Got a nice beat. You can dance to it.
Yeah. Now we're back to EDM. Anyway.
I wasn't expecting that when we started this episode.
So, and all of that points to the fact that in the West, insofar as we could, I don't even like referring to the West anymore because I think it's a false construct. But I mean, really what I'm meaning here is in Western European civilization, right? And its heirs in other parts of the world. Technē really triumphed as a way of knowing.
Yeah.
I think you need look no further than secularism and scientific materialism to demonstrate that has come to predominate to demonstrate that. But it started a lot earlier than that, right? So an example, atonement theories, right? Atonement theories in general, right? The whole idea of an atonement theory in Western European theology is how does the atonement work?
Yeah, like what's the mechanism by which this happens?
How does Christ's death and resurrection work?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And a very good scholar like Simon Gathercole, when he goes to write his book defending the idea of penal substitutionary atonement, like a good Protestant does, right, says that the reason why that is the best atonement theory is it's the only one with a mechanism. His word.
Wow.
It's the only one with a mechanism that explains how it works. That makes it the best one, right? Which is very British, very Western European of him. Right? Because the only critique I'm giving of penal substitutionary atonement here, I've got lots of them elsewhere, but the only one I'm giving here is this idea of mechanism. This idea that God himself must instrumentally use some kind of spiritual technology in order to save a human being.
Yeah.
He can't just do it.
Right.
And the problem that comes, and this is the kind of thing you see in scholastic theology. I'm not just picking on our Roman Catholic friends here. Protestant scholasticism is a real thing, especially in the 17th century. Their whole approach to soteriology is along the lines of this technological approach. And this goes so far in some of the Puritans that these are the people who founded this country, at least according to histories written after Abraham Lincoln. The Puritans, right? Some of them go so far as to say that if you have faith and God tries to send you to hell, that you could press a covenant lawsuit against God, requiring him to actually save you because you have met the condition of faith, and that's the deal.
It's just, I'm dumbstruck by that, but I know it's real. I mean, that's an absolutely serious theology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they mean this as a hypothetical.
Sure, right, of course. Right.
They don't think God is going to try to, they wouldn't say God is going to try to damn anyone who has faith, right?
Right.
But within their system,
think
right?
about it that way. Yeah.
Ideas arise from somewhere, right? What makes that thought thinkable to them is the mechanistic way in which they're viewing salvation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That is a thought that had never occurred to most of our listeners, I'll bet, right? Because they have never approached salvation quite that way, right? From that angle. And of course, right, as we said, atheistic materialism, even beyond there are other forms of materialism. I worry sometimes when we talk about materialism on the show that a bunch of things are getting slurried together.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was a kid growing up in mostly kind of Baptist and Baptist adjacent type churches, materialism was a word that meant possessiveness, being into stuff, basically like Madonna being a material girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not talking about greed or consumerism.
Right.
Per se. Right. I mean, that's obviously not completely unrelated, but, and we're not talking about dialectical materialism. Right. We're not, I don't think anyone would tune into this show for analysis and critique of Marx's Das Kapital.
I would.
So we're not.
It's not what I signed up for.
Yeah, I don't think we'd get even one episode out of that. Right? like halfway through the episode, Faith would just pull the plug and be like, "Why?" Right, but we're talking about atheistic materialism, means or scientific materialism. Essentially, the belief that only things that are materially composed exist.
Yeah. Again, atoms banging against each other.
Yeah.
That's
anything that
is a thing.
Yeah. Anything that isn't materially composed does not exist. Right.
Right.
But that idea, obviously, if you have that idea, then you can see how you end up with no free will, right? You could see how everything is just mechanical interrelations and cogwheels, right? And you can see this back to picking on the 19th century again, right? In the rise of social sciences, right? The idea of social sciences. The idea that there is some science to the way in which an individual human works, right? Some kind of mathematical formula, some kind of discoverable pattern and mechanism. And then when you look at things like sociology, larger things, how humans work in groups and groups work, right?
Yeah.
Why are we trying to find the technē of these things? So that we can manipulate them, so that we can change them, so that we can instrumentally get them to do what we want.
Right. Which, I mean, a lot of people are doing that in a theoretically well-meaning way, although not all of them.
Yeah. Historically, definitely not all of them.
Yeah. Historically, usually not.
Yeah. There are a lot of, there may be some do-gooder social engineers now. But historically, social engineers and eugenicists are not the good guys. Right. But what you end up there, right? Because, and people have probably heard this, right? What's the debate about people's behavior? Like we're going to talk about crime. Where does crime come from? Is it from nature or is it from nurture? Let's pause and think about that a second. Those are the only two options. It's either nature, it's their genetics. They're born that way. Right? And so if you come down on that side, that's where you get eugenics.
Yeah.
We need to stop having people be born that way. We need to get them to be born another way. We need to get rid of all the people who are born that way and or not let them reproduce. Almost all the horrors of the 20th century, right there. Right? And if you want the rest of the horrors of the 20th century, then on the other side are the people who decide it's nurture. It's their environment, right? Therefore, we must re-engineer society to create the new man, right? we can socially engineer this and give people these experiences and these structures that will create a different kind of person. And we will put an end to this. Here comes tyranny, right?
For your own good.
Right. Between those two poles, right?
Yeah.
But those are the only two ways for humanity to improve once you embrace this kind of scientific materialism and this instrumental technological, right, view of the world. Those are the two options you have. Those are the two poles you have to bounce between. Right? And so in many ways, although the Enlightenment wanted to cast itself as an enlightenment, as we're going to throw off the darkness of the Dark Ages, we're going to get rid of all of this Christian nonsense and right, and get to science and knowledge and reason, right? All of these good things. It's not a coincidence that this went hand in hand with a return to pagan literature, right? Pagan art. Because it is essentially a revival of the same worldview that was held by paganism.
Yeah.
Deterministic, fatalistic, mechanistic.
And manipulable. I don't know.
Yeah.
Able to be manipulated. Yeah. I mean, it's in so many ways, the Enlightenment is essentially a kind of reframing of paganism. But now instead of, gods named Zeus and Odin or whatever, it's, gods named progress and whatever else.
Yes. The economy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
It's not going to get much happier from here, guys. I'm warning.
We're talking about technology, and as we just said in the first half, it's about instrumentalizing in all the ways that means. So, speaking of the ancient world, where did us all come from? Yeah.
Where will it go?
Take us back.
Oh yeah. So now we're going back to the not quite the Neolithic era. We're not going back quite that far.
Yeah.
Mainly because we don't have anything written from then, because there wasn't writing.
No. No, we have rocks and scratches and some tombs.
Yeah.
And
so while there was technology, as we already mentioned, right? There was technology. As soon as somebody figured out a way to tie a rock onto the end of a stick and make a spear, right? Which are depicted in those early cave paintings. Technology, we don't know, we don't have the stories from those people in terms of how they understood the origin of technology.
Yeah, we don't know what they thought about it. We don't have, I mean, it is a true Dark Ages, right? In the sense of like, which that was the original meaning of that, everybody, by the way, is that it was a period where there wasn't much literature being produced. That's all that really meant was.
So we sort of can't get back to it in the
published. Right. So we don't know that much about that. It wasn't like all is dark and evil and, whatever, and ignorance rules everyone, which is how we depict it now, at least how the Enlightenment often depicted, So, yeah. Yeah.
I imagine when they first started making like metal bladed knives, there was some guy with like a sharp rock going like, these kids, but we don't know that for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he didn't write anything. So we're going back to, and this is a story we've referred to, really a set of stories, set of Babylonian stories that we've referred to before, from the original Babylonian Empire. So we're talking about the middle of the second millennium BC, not the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire that we meet in the Bible with Nebuchadnezzar and his Nabopolassar and those folks. That's the Neo-Babylonian Empire that takes Judah into exile. This is the original Babylonian Empire, middle of the 2nd century BC, Um, I was about to try to date it in terms of biblical events, but I'd have to weigh in on the date of the Exodus, and I refused. Darn it.
Don't jump
We'll
in.
leave it at that.
Yes.
And this is the story of the Apkallu, or the seven sages, right? Atapa or Adapa and his buds, who are, as we've talked about before, starting with Adapa, who's a sort of a fish person, supernatural being, who emerges from the rivers, comes, and he's called a sage because he comes and he imparts wisdom to the rulers. He's followed by 6 other sages. When you look at kings lists from this period, right, the kings before the flood have these Apkallu, these sages, as their advisors, right? And that's sort of why they are able to become king. They have this wisdom from the spiritual realm, from these spiritual beings. And then, as we've talked about before, after the flood, the kings are said to be 2/3 Apkallu, that there's this sort of interbreeding represented, right, within the story. But the Apkallu proper, from before the flood, they end up imprisoned beneath the rivers in the abyss by the gods for having given this knowledge to man. But the importance of the function of this story in the middle of the second millennium BC for the Babylonian Empire. This Babylonian Empire was established by the Amuru, which literally means the Westerners. They came from what's now Syria. Hammurabi being the most famous one, who's a king during this period. They used this story in large part to justify their own reign, in that they claimed to still have this secret wisdom,
this
given by the Apkallu.
Antediluvian knowledge.
Yeah, they claim to still have this. And of course, as we've mentioned before on the show, the Amuru are the biblical Amorites, that giant clan, right? Probably the most famous one being Sihon, of Og and Sihon. I say probably the most famous because he's the one we sing about at Christmas.
Yeah, or in I think in all of the, why am I blanking on my liturgical language now?
The Polyelios.
Polyelios, there we go. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not Christmas until Og has been slain.
That's on one of my Christmas ornaments, actually.
I will stand by that. If you ever find a dead Og Christmas ornament, send it to me.
Oh, man. I mean,
it will have pride of place.
As I say, now that we live in this age where you can literally just order up any kind of merch with anything on it.
Yeah. Even if you just have the 3D printer plans, like the file, send that to me. Of dead Og Christmas ornament.
You're going to get 100 of those. I'm just saying.
Cool. I am in for it.
You could have an entire Og Christmas tree.
My wife has the miniature paints, right? We'll mix in some Warhammer 40K. It'll be all good.
Nice. Take pictures, post them on the
So right. So this is sort of this. Right. Now remember, we have to always remember, the earliest written thing we have was very likely not created out of whole cloth. Right. So the Apkallu story is not the origin of anything. We can't say that, right? Because there's untold amounts of ancient literature that either didn't survive or is in a cupboard at the British Museum somewhere, untranslated, right? So we don't know, we can't construct an origin, but this is our earliest so far known version of this story. And this version of the story, by the way, didn't become widely known until about 2010. Like journal articles started being published about the translation of these tablets from which the Apkallu stories come around 2010. So 13 years ago. Right. So who knows what's still out there and what we'll learn in the future.
Yeah.
But this is at least a representation, middle of second millennium BC, about the origins of technology, right? About the origins of this kind of technē kind of knowledge, right? And we see, just as and we've talked about this a lot, as we see in the scriptures, we see sort of the God-given take, right, on a number of these stories, like the flood, right? We see in Genesis the God-given take of this kind of story, right? And this is in the period leading up to the flood, particularly associated with the line of Cain as it plays out in his genealogy, especially at the end of his genealogy in Genesis 4.
Yeah. So the end being Lamech.
Yeah.
Not the same guy that's the father of Noah.
No.
Just has the same name.
Apparently it was a common name
Yes.
in the last antediluvian generation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So Genesis chapter 4, verses 19 through 24. And Lamech took 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's is 77-fold.
Right. So Lamech is the first person who's a polygamist in the Bible.
Yeah.
For anyone still unclear on what the Bible thinks about polygamy. And sings this song to his wives about how great he is. And remember, Cain's revenge being 7-fold, that was the revenge God was going to take for Cain.
Right.
So when Lamech says 77-fold, he's saying actually he's greater than God. You should fear him more than God. Nice fella.
It's not a good look.
Right. So the key part here is these 3 sons, right? And what they create, right? So the first one, Jabal, is the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. And you're like, well, what's wrong with living in a tent? That's not the problematic part. It's the livestock part.
Yeah, it's the hoarding of wealth. Because in a hunter-gatherer society, everyone has equal access to the food.
Say you missed a piece there, Father Andrew.
Oh, excuse me.
They're not supposed to be eating animals yet.
Oh, well, there's that as well. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, right? So,
but still.
They haven't been given permission to eat animals. And so what does this represent? This is an element of God's creation that they have chosen to instrumentalize.
Yeah, they're just taking it and controlling it and using
it for food.
Yeah.
Right? That's a very different relationship with animals than what Adam had when he named them. Right?
Yep.
Raising them for slaughter. So there's a shift, and that's technology, right? Learning how to breed, raise, kill, butcher, cook, eat, right? Animals. Jubal is father of those who play the lyre and pipe, right? This is saying music is bad. No, it's not. It's also not why we don't use instruments in liturgy, although I have at least once heard somebody try to argue that.
Wow.
Right. So the lyre and the pipe, as they're translated here, the idea here is that this is a particular type of music. This is a type of music used in pagan festivals and pagan rites. And so this is actually a kind of spiritual technology that they're talking about him devising. right? And then Tubal Cain, who, as everyone knows from the Noah movie, got into an epic fist fight with Noah on the deck of the ark during the flood.
I still haven't seen that. Is it worth it?
Well, it depends what you mean by worth it.
Okay.
I feel compelled to watch all these things, and I was much more entertained by that one than most of them.
Okay.
But I emphasize the word entertained.
Entertained, yeah.
Not informed, entertained.
Right.
It's a thing, yeah. And Noah does not yell, "Are you not entertained?" Just for the record, even though it is
Russell Crowe. Yeah.
During the fist fight. And hey, you've got Anthony Hopkins as Methuselah, so how can you go wrong? Watch the movie to see how you can go wrong. But Tubal Cain, he's the forger of instruments of bronze and iron, right?
Yeah.
Again, bronze and iron
Metallurgy.
tools.
Yeah.
So that's the old, but this is, right, why is this? What's the first thing you do when you learn metallurgy? Weapons.
Yeah, you kill people.
Right? Weapons for killing people. So we see that Cain's line, we're not going to read the whole genealogy, as exciting as that would be. But Cain's line that culminates here, right? You can see there's this descent, right? There's a descent from Cain pun here. But it descends downward. It gets worse, right? And this decline was not seen by, for example, Second Temple Jewish interpreters as being accidental, right? Josephus, for example, portrays Cain as the arch heretic, the one who teaches sin. He teaches sin and wickedness to his children.
Yeah, he's not just like, oh, poor Cain, he made a big mistake and now he's out.
Yeah. But he remained actively evil, right?
He's a villain. Yeah.
Right. And so this continues, right? And it's out of this descent, right, that we see this technology emerging. Right. Out of this descent, technology comes. We don't read about technology coming from Seth's line leading up to Noah. Right. So this means that while the Apkallu story is casting as this positive thing, this coming of divine knowledge, this is a great thing that gives the right to rule, right, and brings glory to a civilization. We see quite the opposite here, right? The technology is actually coming from the worst of the worst, right, and represents a descent into evil. In the Genesis account, though it's, of course, as we've talked about several times on the show, and we won't go back into again, as much as it might excite people, this is the supernatural element of this is at least hinted at or pointed to in Genesis 6:1-4 in terms of the Nephilim. In the expanded version of this story that you get, for example, in First Enoch or the Book of Jubilees, this is made sort of even more clear that it's both gives further description of what the technē is that is received by the line of Cain, and makes it explicitly clear that this is being revealed by demonic powers, right? By specifically fallen, wicked spiritual powers, right? So again, very similar to the Apkallu story, but in a way inverted, right? It's not, these are the good guys bringing wisdom to man, and God or the gods are the bad guy, sort of punishing them and ruining everybody's party. Right?
That's the pagan version of the story.
Right. But quite the opposite, right? Yeah. Quite the opposite, the exact inversion of that, right? And so in the versions we find in the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, right, amongst the technē that's taught is sorcery. This, of course, in Greek is pharmakeia, as we've said before. which is a and again an instrumental means to enter into and manipulate the spiritual realm. Seduction and implements of seduction, like eye makeup, literally in the Book of Enoch.
I mean, cosmetics are part of this bundle of technology used to destroy people.
Yeah, the arts of seduction. And again, we have to remember the arts of seduction in this case, there is the element here heavily of pagan ritual, right? Think about Baal Peor, right? And what goes on there, as we've talked about in the Book of Numbers.
Yeah. Or,
and there's
Thomas Dolby. She blinded me with science.
There's some bestiality stuff in there. But there's also that pagan sexual ritual element, right? It wasn't just, the beguiling of naughtiness. It was just that sexual immorality is bad. Yes, it is, right? But within this context, this is women receiving this from a demonic being with whom they have an intimate relationship, right? And so that other element, that spiritual element, is always present. And of course, divination, right?
Yes,
which is one of the things that's listed.
Trying to tell the future by observing things.
Yeah. But one of the things that we may not think about, right? And, this isn't just a word play, it's a deliberate word choice, right? Is that divination is a way of determining the future. In the sense that if I know what is going to happen tomorrow, then that means it is determined.
Yeah.
Right. So divination was understood not just as a way of, hey, I'm curious, what horse is going to win the 5th race tomorrow so I can place a bet, right? But this is a way of locking it in, right? Locking it into place, right? It's not just satisfying a curiosity. We need to keep that in mind, like with the story of Saul and the Witch of Endor. Right? When he goes before battle, it wasn't just, hey, is this going to go well or is this going to go badly? Because if you say badly, maybe we won't fight, right? Or we'll do something else. Because he's told it's going to go badly and he fights anyway.
Yeah.
Right. It's an attempt to try to lock into place the result that you want.
Yeah. And there's a gazillion ways that this gets done. Like you mentioned the haruspex earlier, examining the innards of slaughtered animals. But like another one, again, from the Iliad, lots of ornithomancy. Yeah. Telling the future by observing birds, also known as augury. But, there's iluromancy, which is cats. There's myrmomancy, ants. I mean, there's so many possibilities.
Yeah. Anything that can form patterns.
Yeah.
You could find someone who claimed to be able to read the patterns.
And it's a specialist. Like it's a technologist who's able to do this, theoretically.
Right. And before we move on from the divination thing, did you know there is both an episode of I Dream of Jeannie and an episode of Bewitched in which they accidentally magic up the next day's newspaper?
I did not know that. And
hilarity ensues involving betting on horses.
And isn't that isn't Barbara Eden in both of those?
No.
Montgomery's
in Bewitched. Come on, man.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I was distracted thinking about marmotomancy, which is what you see in
Marmots. Oh,
Punxsutawney Phil right here in Pennsylvania.
But this whole Bewitched thing, man. Not only have you let me down, I think you've let yourself down. You probably don't even know which one's Dick York and which one's Dick Sargent, do you?
I'll go sit in the corner and you can just monologue for the rest of the episode.
We don't have to go that far.
Okay.
That's although one more infraction. No,
It's been years since I watched either one of those shows, but
so
Nick at Night is no longer like a big part of my life.
well, and Nick at Night now is showing shows from like the 90s. So you just get depressed and feel old.
I know. Apparently now, like the stuff that we listened to in the 80s is, quote, oldies.
Yeah.
That's offensive to me. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, man. Everything we listened to in the 90s is now classic rock.
Ah.
Phones turning to powder. So
let's talk about Prometheus.
Yes, let's talk about something older than us. Yeah. So there are obviously other places. We talked about the Apkallu story sort of being a preceding version of this story from the biblical narrative. The versions that we have, at least, of certain Greek stories, the versions we still possess, are later than the biblical account, but we see similar parallels, right? Even within the pagan versions of these stories. So, for example, Prometheus, right, is in some places identified as a Titan, right? And so his narrative sort of fits into the Titan narrative, the overarching Titan narrative.
And,
we've talked
and also,
before on the show about how,
Can I just say, the most ironically named guy ever? I mean, his name means forethought. I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
Did you really? Anyway, sorry.
We've talked before on the show about how the Titan narrative, the Titans and being imprisoned in Tartarus, is sort of associated in the Second Temple Jewish period, and even in the scriptures themselves, in the New Testament scriptures themselves, with the rebellious angels from before the flood who are imprisoned. Right, St. Peter actually uses the word Tartarus for the place where they're imprisoned. And so he's sometimes referred to as a Titan. We can see there's a similar pattern, right? But of course, he famously brings fire to humanity, right? The knowledge of fire. This brings about his punishment, right, by the gods, right? But what gets often left out, because again, even bizarrely, pagan myths are read in a materialist way, is that the particulars, and you can find this in Hesiod, the particulars of what fire is referring to here, right? Because that could refer to a lot of things. He brings fire to man. The ability to kindle a fire, right? Like,
right. Yeah. The way it's often depicted is like, he gives them a lighter. Like, here's how you make campfire, guys.
Here's a torch. Don't let it go out. Keep other things lit. Right.
No, it's like we've made reference to this on the show before, the whole burning the bones thing where, mankind gives the garbage parts of the sacrifice to the gods. It's Prometheus who teaches them how to do this. It's like, okay, put out the bones and then take the fat and put that on so Zeus won't see that you're not giving him the steaks, and burn that as a sacrifice to him. And meanwhile, you keep the steaks. Like, that's an element of what giving fire to mankind is really about.
Right. The fire here is talking about sacrificial technology.
Yeah.
And this is why the gods get mad.
Yeah. They're not like, oh, they can cook their meat now. No.
Or, hey, they're setting themselves on fire. They would have thought that was funny. Right.
Right. Because that's the kind of gods they are.
The humans are down there setting each other on fire. Ridiculous. It's because of this element, right? This is now there's this bothersome thing going on vis-a-vis the gods themselves.
Yeah.
Right. That makes them mad. Right. The gods generally care about themselves. They care about their demigod kids, and they don't care about pretty much anybody else. Right. Unless Zeus finds you attractive, and then you're in real trouble.
Right. They don't love you unless they love you, and then that's not good.
Yeah. Zeus never understood that no means no. So while we're at it, talking about parallels, we've talked about Prometheus, or at least mentioned Prometheus before in this context of the show. I don't think we've mentioned Sisyphus.
No.
In this context before.
If people know about him, they know he's the rolling the rock up the hill guy.
Yes, which he is.
Yes.
Right. But there's a lot more to it. And Camus fan that I am, Sisyphus, if you actually read the stories about Sisyphus, and there's a couple different versions, by the way, that have been passed down to us, but Sisyphus is the king who founded the city of Corinth.
Good old Corinth.
Yes, and is a bad guy. So
Yeah. Let's say Corinth isn't it? Corinth is the city you go to if you really want to have a dark
debauchery.
night out. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
But so he founded Corinth. The first part of his story, right, where he first sort of comes to the gods' attention, as it were, is he has this brother he wants to kill. His brother, who he wants to kill. But it was widely understood, even among pagans, that, you commit murder within families. That's how you get Furies showing up and dragging you to Hades, right? Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
So he went to the oracle at Delphi to ask Apollo through the oracle at Delphi to give him a technique where he could murder off his brother without incurring wrath.
And I'm getting big ghost vibes here.
Yeah. Well, so there's some of that. There's also some Cain vibes here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
No,
kill my brother. Don't want to get killed in response, right? And then the second part of his story where he gets in trouble is that he was apparently renowned for visitors, travelers, strangers who passed through Corinth. He would murder and take their stuff.
Also, the other big rule, you're not supposed to violate an ancient paganism.
Yeah, hospitality, right?
Yeah.
But here we get some Lamech vibes.
Yeah.
Right? I've killed a young man for wronging me. I've killed a... But because of those two things, right, the gods killed him, right? But here's how good of a technologist Sisyphus was. So depending on the version of the story, either Thanatos or Hades, right, one of those two gods, is responsible for chaining him up in the underworld, right? Because of this bad stuff he did. And Sisyphus talked either Hades or Thanatos into explaining to him how the chains worked.
It could just, I mean, I could see this as like a scene in a sitcom or something, right?
Yeah. Hey, how do these chains of death work, by the way? So they explain it to him and he figures it out.
Yeah.
So not only does he get loose, but he chains up Hades or Thanatos.
Yeah, which has the effect of
that makes a break for it.
Making it so that nobody can die.
Right, so nobody dies. And then in the Hades version of the story, this makes Ares very mad because he's got wars going on and nobody's dying. That's no fun.
And that's the thing he's into.
Right? That's like his whole bit, right? In the Thanatos version of the story, because of the nature of Thanatos as a god of death, we've talked about this before on the show, but no one can die, meaning like the sick and the wounded and the infirm and the elderly can't die. So they're just sort of lingering and suffering. Right. Either way, right, someone comes, either Ares in the one version or one of the other gods in the other version, and lets the death god loose again, and Sisyphus ends up in Tartarus pushing the rock up the hill.
Yeah, which rolls down as soon as he gets it up there, and he has
rolls down every night. Then he has to push it back up.
Futility. Yeah, it's
futile labor.
Yeah.
Futile labor, not feudal labor. He's not
right.
Farm
He's on a serf.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, other mythic traditions have gods who function in some of these ways of giving knowledge to mankind, secret knowledge, right? There's different versions of it, but like none of them are quite exactly Prometheus. But I mean, a lot of it is just variations on a theme. But one of the things that's interesting to me is the kind of the second tier of this that you get, especially in like you get in Germanic mythology, particularly, which again, reminder everybody, Germanic mythology comes to us through Christians who wrote it down, often centuries after the last pagan in their area was baptized, right? The last great pagan tradition, get baptized. And so, so it's mediated through that. And so what you get then is sort of these lesser spiritual beings, not titans or whatever, right? These kind of lesser spiritual beings who have knowledge, but it's often not in terms of like giving knowledge to people so that they can rule, but rather providing them with cool stuff. And so that's where you get this whole realm of like Smith gods, right? So my favorite is Wayland the Smith, who's actually sort of divine. And in Germanic paganism, he's often the guy who makes whatever impressive sword or bit of armor that's around in the story is often said to be from Wayland, that he's the guy who made that, or Wayland, depending on where you are, or Voland, same guy. But then you also get like dwarves, again, like they're making magical stuff, especially magical weapons. But then you also get like Wayland, for instance, becomes a tutor figure. Like gods will send their sons to him to go so they can learn stuff from him. So he still functions in that same way. But this idea, right, of the kind of the divine mediator of technology is still a thing, even though now it's kind of demoted a little bit within some of these more marginal mythologies. And by marginal, I don't mean that they're not important. I mean marginal in the sense of like being long distance away from the ancient Near East where the Bible arises and so forth. Yeah.
And this is not the Wayland of Wayland-Yutani Corp, by the way.
Could be.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No. Guy Pearce played him. Anyway, never mind. So, right. And of course, if we want really post-biblical, as in recent, right?
Yeah.
Comparatively, this is an enduring story about technology.
Yeah.
Right. Probably, I don't know anymore. I'm about to go on a grumpy old man rant that I'll stop myself from, but what ought be the most prominent example would, of course, be the novel Frankenstein.
Yes, which is a good novel.
Yes.
Good.
It's subtitled The Modern Prometheus.
And probably we have to remind some folks that Frankenstein is not the monster.
Oh, au contraire. Frankenstein is the monster.
Well, right?
Ah.
Frankenstein's not the creation. I'll put it that way. Yes, it is true. A monster makes a monster.
Yeah.
Frankenstein.
So, but what is that about? Right? It's about this person who seeks and ultimately finds this knowledge of life and death.
Yeah, how to overcome death itself.
Right. And that knowledge unleashes destruction. Right? It's knowledge that's not meant for man, right? That the man shouldn't have. Technically, the entire over of H.P. Lovecraft is about this. That there's just knowledge and corners of the world that humanity was not meant to poke into. Right? It should just leave alone. Although, as a tech pessimist myself, right, I connect with that. And of course, if we want very recent, whether we're talking about Michael Crichton's novel or the movies, Jurassic Park is just a knockoff of Frankenstein.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's scientific secrets. We're going to make life. Oops. Right. And of course, even more recent than that, right, in terms of movies, right, Oppenheimer, right, the atomic bomb, as we've talked about in the show, its first actual use in the world was to massacre more than half of the Christians in Japan. Again, there's no view from nowhere, right? And our perspective, of course, when we talk about something like technology is colored by the historical epoch in which we find ourselves and the sort of explosion of technology at the end of the 20th century. And it really is an explosion of technology. right?
Yeah.
For those of you not as old, right?
I
I
mean,
went from no such thing as an internet to internet that you pay for by the hour to unlimited internet on a small thing in my hand.
yeah, and I mean,
Right.
I remember my favorite on the phone timeline of development is where we go from, you know, these things that are attached to the wall to the bag phone. I
Yeah, to the cell phone. Right, rotary phones attached
yes,
to the
rotary phones. I
Yes.
know. Before they're
the
even
touch
push
tone
button.
phone to the cordless phone to the
But the bag phone was a great
yeah, the big bag phone, big giant
moment.
Motorola brick that you had to plug into the cigarette lighter.
You know, when I
Do they
first,
even call it a cigarette lighter now? Do they call it a power port or something? Because no one
I
uses
don't-
it for cigarettes.
I know. I know.
Anyway, see, this is the old men yell at clouds part.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that is
my
an
Luddite-
explosion of yeah,
my Luddite line used to be firmly on the other side, on this side of cell phones. Like I used to say, I will never get a cell phone. I don't want that kind of thing. And then I finally got like a flip phone. I had a Razor, you know, back in 2007. Finally got one, you know, in my early 30s. I finally got a cell phone.
no. The day I retire as a priest, I will no longer have a cell phone.
Mm. Yeah. That's why I got one, because I was working,
Yeah,
you know.
I have to, like, but
Yeah. Yeah.
otherwise, anyway, yeah, old man yelling at clouds. But so the point being, there has been, objectively, there has been a massive leap of technology
Yeah.
in the last 40
we feel
years.
it. We feel it, right? We
The last
feel
40
like,
years.
especially those of us who are Gen X have seen our worlds completely change from when
Yeah.
we were kids.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
different. The amount of change between 1943 and 1983 was far less
Sure. Yeah.
than what happened in these last 40 years.
Take that.
But this isn't the first time this has happened, though, either. Because if you go back another 40 years, if you go to 1903 to 1943, you do have something comparable.
Yeah. I mean, you go from, if you're lucky, you know, riding something that's pulled by a horse to
Right. Walking
automobiles
or horse
everywhere.
and buggy.
Yeah. Automobiles everywhere, radio,
Right.
you know, tanks being rolled out, machine guns, like all of this
Having
stuff.
phones in your home. Right. Where
Yeah.
you can call
Yeah.
people on the other side of the country or in Europe.
Flight. I mean, flight, that's huge.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Pl-
All that stuff
airplanes.
happens
Yes.
in the first few decades of the 20th century.
So while there has been this boom, it is not an unprecedented boom. Sorry, Roswell theorists. There have been other booms. There was a boom at the beginning of the 20th century too. There have been others. I mean, Gutenberg inventing the printing press. There's a period of time that, right. So there have been other periods in history where you have these technological leaps forward, right? And then periods in between where things are relatively stagnant or at least slower moving.
Yeah.
And no one should conclude, I made a joke about the Roswell theorists, but no one should conclude based on what we said in the second half that what we mean is that every time there's one of these leaps, demons showed up somewhere and cut a deal with somebody to give them the technology either.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes there are actually inventions the way that we modern think about inventions. People sitting around tinkering, figuring.
Well, or it's more subtle than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, often it's built, someone's building on
Right.
something that someone else built on, that someone built on, but
Right.
et cetera.
Right. I mean, someone did go ahead to drop the bombs, the atomic bombs. Right. And we're not going to say that wasn't influenced by anything or anyone spiritually. Right. Especially the target selection. When it gets dropped primarily on Christian communities, there's something going on there. Right. But it's not as direct as what we're talking about, the Apkallu story or something. Right.
Yeah.
There wasn't one of the Apkallu hanging around like Clinton's White House being like, here is how to turn FidoNet into the...
I was going to say, but I remember in the Weekly World News that it said that President Clinton met on a regular basis with space aliens.
I know, but
I
only
still have
about,
that issue around somewhere.
only about 80% of what's published in the Weekly World News is true.
Still read the paper. But yeah, so the question is like, because this is the question we get. Is this kind of knowledge evil?
Right.
Like
Is
what?
technē itself
Yeah. Is it bad?
evil? The knowledge, is it evil? Right.
Yeah.
Inherently.
Yeah. There's certain things that you must not know.
Yes. Things like H.P. Lovecraft, right? Knowledge man was not meant to have, right? Short answer, no.
Yeah.
Long answer, no. Anyway. So there is not knowledge in this sense that is forbidden to humanity, period. Right? Full stop. There is knowledge that is forbidden to humanity by circumstance.
Hmm.
And it's that circumstance that makes it forbidden.
Yeah. Like, I mean, and this shouldn't be difficult, everybody, especially parents. Like I have a 16-year-old, I have a 14-year-old, I have an 11-year-old, and I have a 6-year-old. There are certain knowledge that the 16-year-old, it is okay for that one to have, but not for the 6-year-old. Inappropriate. The circumstances are not right. It is forbidden. You know?
Yeah. You don't go to a 4-year-old and say, everyone you know is going to die someday.
Right.
Right? I went that way.
Now, this is how this box of matches works.
Yes, right? Like,
Which, like a 4-year-old, you could show them and they could light a match. They could get that. You know? Like they're capable of that. Ask me how I know.
Right. And right. So this is right, a simple concept, but this goes even to, right, we're going to go back again to Genesis, right? As is our want, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? You want the first story of a certain type of knowledge being forbidden, that being violated, there being bad consequences for humanity. This is it, right?
This is the original.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the example. And this is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. As it's described in Genesis chapters 2 and 3, the knowledge of good and evil is something God has.
Yeah, and God is good, purely good. Like
He has become like us, knowing good and evil, right?
Knowing good and evil, yeah.
Right? And the angels have it.
Yeah.
Right? So
Which
it's
is
not
also,
that this,
I was going to say, that's also in Genesis 3, right? Where the serpent says, if you get this, if you eat this, you'll become, and then there's various ways that it gets translated, like God, like gods, or as I pointed out before in the show, one of the earliest Old English translations of this, it says like angels. You become like angels if you eat this fruit.
Right. And so this knowledge is an evil, this tree is an evil tree. God made an evil tree for some reason, right?
Yeah.
And this has always been understood this way, right? You read, like, again, since we mentioned it already this episode, and we don't mention it as often as some people think, but the Book of Enoch, right?
Right. Just constantly talk about the Book of Enoch. Wait, what? Actually, we've never even done an episode on the Book of Enoch.
Yeah. Other Enochic literature, other apocalyptic Jewish literature, and Christian literature, when you have a vision of paradise, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is still there.
Still there. It's not cut down. You know,
it's not destroyed. There's nothing evil about it. The way it's been understood consistently in Judaism and at least in early Christianity is that the issue was that humanity was not mature enough to receive that knowledge yet.
Yeah, not ready yet.
But God created that tree and put fruit on it. So there would have come a day when humanity was ready to have that knowledge that God and the angels already had.
Yeah, it wasn't just an ornamental tree.
But and it wasn't just a test. It wasn't just a random test, right? But it was something for which humanity wasn't ready. And this is the understanding of what's going on with that knowledge in the line of Cain. right? It's not that learning how to make things out of metal is itself evil, right? Blacksmiths are not evildoers, right? Like,
No.
it's that humanity wasn't ready for that knowledge that they were given, that they got from spiritual sources, and so they used that knowledge for destruction. They used it to make war, to kill each other, right? Not to make useful implements to help society, right? Same thing with the other technology. Same thing with the atom bomb that gets used to kill a bunch of Christians, right? There are lots of good uses for nuclear power, for example. But all of this begs the question, and we've quoted, I believe it was St. Sophrony who said at one point, when asked about technology, asked about this burst of technology in the 20th century, what he thought about it. And he said, if we as humans were holier, God would allow us to have more technology. Because we would have the spiritual sense and the wisdom to know how to use it rather than destroying ourselves with it. Right. But what all of this presupposes that we may not have thought about maybe in the past, right? Even people who are familiar with the way we're talking now, because we talk that way. St. Basil the Great talks that way. When he talks about Genesis, the fathers talk that way. Right? There's lots of places where you could have gotten this understanding that it was an issue of maturity with Adam and Eve, that was an issue of maturity with angels. But this implies that there has to be some kind of, for humanity to be ready, requires that there has to be some sense of the collective maturity of humanity.
Yeah, because technology is not ever a thing that's just one person. It's a kind of, it always spreads.
Right. And so this wasn't like, well, someday you Adam and you woman, or you man and you woman, you will be mature enough that you can eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But then when your kids are born, they won't be yet.
Yeah. It's none of them.
And they'll have to wait.
Right.
Right. This is an issue of humanity. Right. And it wasn't just that, Tubal Cain wasn't mature enough as a person to learn metallurgy. Right. This has to be a collective sense. This understanding implies a collective sense of humanity, that humanity has a collective maturation. Okay. And once we start thinking about that, right, there are a bunch of other things in terms of how the fathers read the scriptures and within traditional Christian theology that start to make sense. Because we've been taught to think about things purely in these individual terms.
Yeah, that's because that's how our society works.
Right. And not in these collective terms. So, for example, it is a commonplace when talking about why Christ was born when he was, when you're reading the church fathers, for them to talk about, and this idea is sort of forecast in Second Temple Jewish literature, that the history of Israel has a through line and a purpose, right? That the purpose of this history that we read in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, is that this remnant of Israel, most of Israel stripped away, but this remnant of Israel that's been purified, that's been tried by fire, right, and tested, this faithful remnant will emerge at the end. And from that faithful remnant will emerge the Messiah.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it means when it says in the scripture that in the fullness of time, God sent his son. It doesn't mean that the date finally arrived,
Right.
Yeah.
It's right. And it doesn't mean,
humanity.
The Romans had really good roads, so the gospel could go lots of places. Well, then he could have waited till 1995 and it could have gone out on the internet.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah. No, it's right that this purpose was. And that you'll see the fathers then talking about how the history of Israel culminates in the Theotokos.
Yeah.
That the holiness of the Theotokos, the purity of the Theotokos, this woman who is there to become the mother of God, the one who gives birth to God, right? Who gives birth to Jesus Christ, right? Is the end product of that history of Israel, generation after generation, being tested and tried and finding repentance and purification and restoration to God and faithfulness to God. All of that legacy, all of that culminates in her so that she can give birth to the Messiah, right? This is why when it comes to Revelation 12, when someone asks you, is that the Theotokos or is that Israel? The answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Porque no los dos, right? Because this is how the fathers understand it, right? That there's this through line of history. The history is building to something, right? It is moving in a direction. Something is happening in the flow of history, and that involves, again, a collective identity for humanity. This is what in St. John's Gospel, when Christ promises that when the Holy Spirit comes, he will lead you into all truth. He's not saying, well, I taught you some stuff, but then when the Holy Spirit comes, he's going to tell you other stuff.
Yeah, it's not about information.
Right. Like new info, right? He's not going to tell your pastor what to say on Sunday, even though he was planning to say something else. Not that anyone would ever say that. Right? But it's that history, this movement of history, right, isn't finished. Isn't finished. We don't know what it is, but there's a reason Christ hasn't returned yet.
Yeah.
Right? There is something happening that is building toward that.
Yeah, it's not just, to be continued. We're not just waiting.
Right. But just like in the Second Temple period, for example, they were looking around going, why hasn't the Messiah come yet? Right? Because they couldn't see it from that viewpoint, right? After he comes, then everyone looking back on it goes, oh, that was the time, right?
Oh.
That's where things were moving all along. In the same way, right? We could look around and say, why hasn't Christ appeared? Things are getting really bad, right? But there is a process unfolding, and that is associated by the scriptures with the Holy Spirit. This flow of history is associated directly by the scriptures with the Holy Spirit. And so the Holy Spirit is the one guiding history, particularly in and through the church, right? And this is the key to understanding the Orthodox understanding of Holy Tradition.
Yeah. And like this, to link back to one of our major themes, but also a particular episode about what a spirit is, a spirit, and especially the Holy Spirit who animates the church, is, it's this spirit that animates a people, that animates a group, or sometimes an individual. But in talking about Holy Tradition, it is this overall historical unfolding, but it's not a deterministic unfolding. Like, it's God himself is working. He has agency. He's doing all this. And sometimes, a lot of the time, we cannot see what he's doing, right? Just to think about it on an individual level, not that we're talking about it on the individual level, but we do experiencing it on an individual level. Like for instance, if someone has had a true conversion to Christ, and a lot of you listening to this have had a true conversion to Christ, you probably could not have predicted that 5, 10 years, maybe 1 year before that happened. And it's only in retrospect that you look back on your life and see how it was leading in that direction, right? That the narrative is something that's apparent in retrospect, but not in the moment. Well, this is fractal. And it's not like God is like, well, I'm working on this guy right now and I'll take care of the rest. Like, no, God is God. So he's working on every level, always, everywhere, all the time. Which is, astonishing to even begin to think about.
Right. On a personal level, this is part of why I don't talk about my quote unquote conversion story to Orthodoxy. It's at least part of it.
Yeah.
Because from my perspective now, my experience of my life is not, I was heading in one direction and then there was this radical course correction and I headed in another direction.
Yeah.
My experience of my life is from very early on, in ways that are frankly kind of ooky, God was working to bring me to exactly where I am right now.
Yeah.
There were hints of it in weird places
Yeah.
that only from my vantage point now do I understand, right? And so, like I said, this is part of the reason there's no point in really telling that story. I am who I am now, right? That's the result of it, right? But yeah, this and this is true on this macro level, right? So tradition is not, Christ told the apostles a bunch of other stuff. He said, hey, don't write this down. Just when you ordain bishops later, kind of whisper it in their ear and they'll pass it on to the next group. And so each generation of bishops has sort of passed on the secret knowledge. That's called Gnosticism.
Yeah.
If you think that's what tradition is in the church, go read some St. Irenaeus, right? Where he contrasts what goes on in the church and that and makes clear, no, the church proclaims everything.
Yeah, it's a proclamation.
Publicly.
It's not an esoteric secret knowledge.
Right.
You just don't get it, you know.
Right. No. Tradition is often defined in the Orthodox Church as the life of the Holy Spirit in the church, but that's what this means. Right? That's what this means. The historical reality of the church and her journey through the world, right? We believe is inspired and guided by the Holy Spirit. Right? And so that is how you discern Orthodox tradition, is by looking back through the history. What writings have been preserved? What writings have been promoted? What is Scripture? Well, what historically became Scripture, right? And on and on and on, right? And so what is the holy tradition of the church is actually a very objective thing. It can be concluded very objectively, right? But this is the Holy Spirit, right? And so we have to approach questions regarding technology from this perspective of human collective identity, which is not how we tend to approach them. Because again, we've been taught to think as individuals, to think about individualism. And so when the question comes up, you know, when I go on one of my rants condemning social media, right? What I get as a response usually are people saying, well, I have this or that social media, and here is this good thing I do with it. Right? Which is a very individualistic approach, right?
Sure.
So yes, there's lots of people doing bad things with it, or it's having bad effects on lots of people, but I do this good thing with it, right? But the question about technology all along, as I think we've shown, is that this collective question. What is this doing to humanity? What is this doing to cultures, to societies, to communities? Right? Because it's not that when Tubal-Cain comes up with metallurgy, no one did anything good with metallurgy.
Right.
It's that on the collective whole, it was primarily used for killing. Right? And so we have to assess what's going on with technology and the role it's at least currently playing in terms of what is the broad effect this is having. What is the primary use to which this is being put? Right? And if we conclude that that is negative, that that is bad, that as we all know from a certain rule, the internet is always at least 50% pornography. Right?
Yep.
At some point, we have to say, look, until we develop the spiritual wisdom, we, plural, develop the spiritual wisdom to employ this correctly, right? we need to move away from this technology. Right? Because no matter how many good uses I come up to for the internet, like, say, doing the Lord of Spirits podcast live on the second and fourth Thursdays of the month, right? Over the internet. I'm aware of the irony here, right? Right? The fact that your tween-age son can listen to Lord of Spirits on a computer in his room with an internet connection does not mean you should put a computer in his room with an internet connection. Because that's not most of what's going to be pumped into his room.
Yeah.
Okay. We have to look at these broader, right, effects and these broader things, right? And for humanity as a collective to develop the kind of spiritual wisdom necessary to do these things has become much harder of late because we all think as individuals.
Yeah, the sense of who we are as a people, or even just like who we are as a town is getting more and more lost. You know, like I my sense is that it happened in two stages. Like initially we lost attention to the place that we're in, and all of our attention was on sort of like national things, which it's still obviously there's a big discrepancy there. People know way more about, you know, who the president is or who, you know, what's going on in Congress than they do what's going on in their town council.
Yeah.
You know,
even though the town council affects them a lot more.
Yeah, with you know, meetings that they could literally go and attend and be heard and whatever, right? But then the next stage was, you know, because all of that became so much just this info blast. We retreated into echo chambers and isolation, and you know, it's no longer like now we's mass communicating. It's like mass communication. It's funny. Like I've had people ask me, like, can you use your platform to promote this? And I'm like, you know, I don't think you understand how this works. It's not like I have a big megaphone that everybody listens to. I don't. You know, we don't, right? Like you and I could advertise something on this show, but that doesn't make it be a thing. You know, hopefully, you know, God willing, we connect to the people who are listening to us, whatever. But there's this balkanization that's occurred, this fragmentation that's occurred, and is getting more intense. Somebody actually asked me earlier today, like, I mean, they were joking a little bit, but because there was a 3-week gap between our last episode and this one, they said, well, you know, what am I supposed to do about withdrawal symptoms? I was like, go take a walk.
Yeah, touch grass.
Go take a walk. Don't like listen more or whatever. I mean, you know, of course, I'm happy if people listen to the show or read your books, whatever.
Listen in groups. Listen.
There you go.
Get together,
which
with
is a thing.
To listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know.
Right, but that points to a key, right? One of the main differences, and this is part of why this has gotten more difficult, one of the main differences between the technological explosion at the beginning of the 20th century and at the end of the 20th century and beginning of the 21st is that the technological explosion at the beginning of the 20th century primarily connected people, right? Now people could listen to the same radio shows all over the country.
Yeah, people would gather around a radio.
Right? In groups. And then early television, right? Everybody was watching the same shows, right? Because there weren't that many channels, right? And that created a shared culture, a shared background, a shared frame of reference. The beginning of air travel, right? You could go and see your relatives on the other side of the country more often, right? People were more connected, right? You get the interstate highway system, right? All of these things are connecting people, creating a broader sense of community. And the more recent technological explosion at the end of the 20th, the beginning of the 21st century has done the exact opposite.
Yeah, I mean, now that there's a million choices for every person, I mean, everybody has their own little thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Their own set of facts, right? Their own news from their own source. Like that was one of the shifts, right? It used to be, towns had two newspapers. One was Republican and one was Democrat. Sometimes that was in the name,
Yeah. Right.
literally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like there are multiple. And then when people moved to everybody's getting their news from the same radio broadcasts and the same TV broadcasts, that was a uniting thing.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean that what gets broadcast was all true and good.
No, it's not objective.
Right.
Nothing's objective. We've said that.
But yeah, but there was at least this common participation going on.
Right. There's and you could argue about it.
Yeah.
You could say, I think Cronkite's right on. You could say, I think that Cronkite's a nut, right? Like,
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but you had a common basis for conversation, right? Which you don't anymore, right? Literally, people are working from different sets of facts
Yeah.
now. And you can isolate yourself through the internet, through things into just an echo chamber where you never hear an idea that you don't already agree with.
Yeah. Where now, like, with sort of cancel culture, like if I hear a thing I disagree with, I can call that a harm. Like I am being harmed by hearing or being exposed to or reading a thing that I disagree with. Like it's a
And not only do you block it for yourself, but you try to get it to not exist anymore. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
But
For everybody.
right. But this is isolating. This is alienating to people. Right?
Yeah.
This is separating us. Right?
Yep.
And that creates this kind of feedback loop where we're not able to collectively come together and decide how to use this technology productively because the current use of the technology is pulling us apart and breaking us apart.
Yeah.
Right? In this destructive way. Right? And beyond our final comment, there's no magic wand to wave. That's why I said this episode isn't going to get super happy and happy ending. There's not a magic wand to wave. There's not an easy way past this.
No.
There just isn't. We've reached a point in terms of our lives, our work lives, our political lives, right? Our everything else, right? Even our religious lives, sadly, where everything is fractured, broken up, alienated, isolated, and all of the technology we have is just furthering that and driving it and instrumentalizing us into being consumers until we run out of debt that we can take on, right? That's the state of affairs.
Father Stephen?
So part of what comes out of what we were talking about all night tonight is that the opposite of this kind of instrumentalization of human persons, of their dehumanization, of their alienation, is freedom. Ultimately, what it is a removal of freedom. Part of the problem is that we've been taught to think of freedom in the wrong way. Because we've been taught to think of freedom as individuality. This is another one of those feedback loops. Right? Freedom is individuality, meaning freedom is I can go and dye my hair some unnatural color that nobody else's hair is dyed. Right? I can go and buy. I can go and buy guns. I can go and buy drugs. I can go and do this. I can go and do that. This makes me free. None of that is freedom. Freedom, in terms of the scriptures, in terms of the teachings of Christianity, freedom is freedom to serve the living God and thereby freedom to flourish. Freedom to be human. Freedom to become the person God created you to be. And you can't do that as an individual. Humans can't exist alone. Even Aristotle knew that, and he was a pagan. Humans have to exist in community. To be human, you have to be in a community. That's where you become free. Free to flourish. But again, what we've been talking about tonight implies what it is that we need to become free from once again. There are people and powers, sometimes powers behind people, who have instrumentalized ideas in order to instrumentalize us, in order to dehumanize us and enslave us. And I'm super glad that we have a disclaimer in front of the show now, because I could say things like what I'm about to say. I probably would anyway, but okay. Palestinian people need to be free. Not free to be individuals. Not free to eat McDonald's. They need to be free to flourish as humans. The only way they can do that is to cast off the ideas their masters have used to enslave them. Israeli people need to be free. The only way for them to be free is to cast off the ideas, the fear, the racial animosity, the pride that have been used against them to enslave them. Israeli people and Palestinian people will become free when they become free together, by throwing off their masters who have pitted them against each other to their own destruction. You can say the same thing about Ukrainian people and Russian people. But you can say the same thing about Norwegian people, about American people, about Australian people, Chinese people, Brazilian people. We are currently doing things that we don't really want to do, that are making our lives worse, that are alienating us, that we've been tricked into doing by a prolonged indoctrination in certain ideas, lying to us about where our happiness lies, lying to us about what we need to be afraid of, lying to us about other people to keep us separated from them and isolated and alone, which makes us better prey for the ideas that the people and the powers that have become our masters want us to do. I'm going to end up in a similar place to where Father Andrew did. Because the way out of this, the way to be free, we have to be free in a community. We have to be free with other people. And frankly, the only place we can do this now is in our parishes. The only place we can do this now is the church. There's not another spot to start building a community from, even if we wanted to. Right? There's not another place where we can come together and look at our culture, look at our political leadership, and I often use leadership here loosely, look at what we're receiving from the media, look at it, and collectively together as a community say, you know what, no. We're not going to do that. We're going to stop buying things. Not particular things. Not, I'm going to boycott these people because they did X, Y, Z. You know what? We don't need to buy so many things. I'm not defined, my identity isn't defined by what I consume. That's a dumb idea. This person isn't different from me, and I don't need to be fundamentally different from me, and I don't need to be afraid of them because they're from a different neighborhood. They immigrated from a different country. They look different. They act different. They smell different. Doesn't matter. We can come together and collectively say that as a community. And when we do, we will become free. We'll experience freedom. We'll experience more of the fullness of our humanity. We'll be emboldened, we'll be empowered to get about the work that God created for us to do in this world. Being set free from sin to serve the living God is not just something that happened in Egypt under Moses or in Palestine in 30 AD when Christ died and rose again. It's something that has to happen for each of us. And as many times as we allow ourselves to become enslaved again, we need to be set free again. Because one of the most important powers that Christ has given to us when he gave us the Holy Spirit is the power to break those chains of ideology, of thoughts that bind us and try and hold us in that kind of slavery. So that's my final thought, is that all of us need to free ourselves. And we do that together. And we do that by rejecting the thoughts, the ideas, the ideologies that are currently keeping us from doing that and keeping us from being human together.
Amen.